Driving down the road and some big truck passes us and it has big flag pulling out the back of the truck, right next to it. And it has big flag. And I went and said, Baba, you should have one of those big pulls in the back of your stuff. And I was like, oh, really? And my daughter says, yes, with a big Jordanian flag. and then my other daughter was like, oh, yeah, that would be great. And then my other daughter says, no, oh, look. And then they fall all the way home over which flag was going to be flying from the back of my truck. And at no point did anybody ever suggest that it should be
Okay, thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming, people in the room and people in this on the Zoom, and welcome to another MBL lecture. And this today series is the second series about what is happening in relation to our understanding of mainly OCMS as a case study or as a GRP program. And this is our second series. The third series will be at the end of April, 30th of April, which Tom will present that. And the fourth lecture in the same series will be on the 9th July by one of our alumni scholar. However, again, another announcement before I introduce our speaker here, that we will not have lecture next week. Next week is a away day. We will be mainly staff together. There is no lecture next week. So that's therefore in that allow me to introduce my colleague, Reverend Canon Mark Oxborough, as our speaker today. And Mark is a very interesting person and has a very interesting journey throughout his working experience and ministry experience. And one of Mark's hobby is collecting hats around the world. Wherever he goes, he collects hats. And because he thinks, you can ask him later, the hats can also tell quite a lot about the cultures of where he visits or that. The same thing because his interest is in hats. So when it comes to Christian organization and ministries, he also has lots of hats. He also collects hats in that sense. So he is very well connected in Christian circles, ministries around the world again. However, he's more known in the evangelical Anglican circles as well as the Orthodox. And Mark, did I say you retired? Mark retired, but he hasn't lost his hats yet. He continues working, and he is our director of GRP at OCMS here, as well as he is the chairperson of Christian Muslim scholars in here. I need to read again. Let me just go back to my notes actually to say the name. And he is also president of Feed the Mind. And he also, as I mentioned, chairing the board of Solomon Academic Trust, which runs the Center of Muslim Studies in Oxford. And therefore, you see, from hats to hats, he's an excellent network. Therefore, wherever you go, they know Mark. And if you know if you wanted to get to know someone, or if you wanted to know about someone, come to Mark again, ask him, because he knows that. And with that, another thing which we are so thankful for Mark here at OCMS, he actually developed beautifully our GRP program, and GRP program has brought an amazing richness into our scholarship academia. And myself, when I attend any of the GRP seminars, I feel so privileged to sit there and listen to those scholars coming from around the world, different ideas, that is part another extension to the richness of our academic approach in relation to the mission within the church. And Mark has been doing an amazing work. Today's talk is about what is happening in GRP plan reporting, as well as a strategy and also academic analysis of all what is happening in GRP. And I'm so pleased to see some of the GRP scholars already on the Zoom and also some here in this room. With that, may I just invite you to give us your talk.
Thank you. Just while I'm getting the sharing running, to say to you, if you ever go to Georgia, not in the US, but the country of Georgia, do make sure you come back with a felt hat. They have wonderful thick felt hats which keep you wonderfully warm in winter. And in the summer, you throw it in the river, stamp on it till it's full of water, and then you put it on your head and it keeps you cool all day. So I'm sharing my screen here. Good. This room has the disadvantage, there's no sensible place to sit where you can see everybody. So I'm going to concentrate on looking at my small screen because I think that way you've got probably more people can see me. So forgive me if I don't look sideways at the people in the room or this way to the people on screen. I'm going to take the liberty of taking my brief a little bit more widely and using the GRP as a case study for something I want to talk about a little bit more widely, which is about the nature of Christian research and how we advance that. In the context of a topic that some of you know is very much a key point of, connects many of my hats, many of the things I've done in life, which is the theme of discipleship. Now, why is it not advancing? We sometimes have this problem here. Because I'm not clicked to the right place, that's working. Good. So we're going to be looking, this is an outline or an agenda, if you like. I'll be looking at the issue of research in Christian witness, looking at the possibility of alternative routes in research, then looking at the case study and some reporting, as Sarah said, on the guided research program. Then particularly the focus that the GRP has on dissemination application of research, moving on to how we understand research as a discipleship priority, and then a few more practical hints about ways we might move forward at the end. So I'm going to begin with Christian research and witness, and I'm going to begin with scripture. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of God, of the Lord, and who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay them? For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. This final doxology from St. Paul's Theological Opus Magnum, echoing also Job 38 and 39, sets all human knowledge and wisdom in context. At first reading, it might appear to be a recipe for despair. All knowing is ultimately beyond our reach. But in the context of the whole book of Romans, it must be read rather as a challenge, or rather an invitation to participate in the divine truth, to know the mind of the Lord, in order that we might walk in his paths. Elsewhere in his letter to the Christians in Ephesus, Paul writes, with all wisdom and understanding, God made known to us the mystery of his will. God made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in Christ to be put into effect when the time reaches their fulfillment, to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. Both of these passages stress that the pursuit and acquisition of knowledge has a divine focused purpose and objective, which put quite simply has two interlocking dimensions: the glory of God and the fulfillment of all things under Christ. This single two-dimensional purpose is as true for our knowledge of earth sciences and human psychology as it is for theology and missiology. These passages, together with Genesis 2, verse 16, and its description of how the source of the knowledge of good and evil became an irresistible temptation for mankind, also suggests that inquiry, the thirst for knowledge and understanding, is a natural characteristic of humankind from creation onwards. We don't call it research, but every time a child puts a stone in their mouth, climbs dangerously high on a chair, tries out their first vape, or studies closely the way a parent drives the car, they're researching the world in which they live, seeking knowledge and understanding, and we hope wisdom. It is often said that we should encourage lifelong learning, but in a sense, we have no need to do this, for men and women are naturally hungry for information, knowledge, and understanding. What Genesis 2:16 reminds us of is the vital importance of the direction of inquiry and the purpose with which we approach research. Our acquisition of knowledge is never for our own aggrandizement, or even for that of our community, but rather for the glory of the all-knowing God and the advancement of God's reign, through which all things find fulfillment in unity in Christ. When we gather for our graduation ceremony and rightly applaud those before us who have been awarded degrees and doctorates in recognition of their contribution towards human knowledge, we sometimes can struggle to remember that the true purpose of the advancement of human knowledge, understanding, and wisdom is this glory of God and the fulfillment of all things. As we consider the design and delivery of academic programs, it's important to be asking ourselves questions which will help us to ensure that the ultimate purpose of our enterprise is clearly in mind. It's appropriate that we help individuals advance their careers or find personal fulfillment, that organizations are strengthened through the tertiary education of their staff, and that our own institution gets credit for the achievement of graduating good scholars, but not at the expense of the glory of God and the fulfillment in unity of all things in Christ, the advancement of the reign of God. In a secular context, Peter Reason writes, "A central purpose of human inquiry is to develop knowledge that informs and guides the way we and others live our lives. It is a living knowledge or action inquiry immediately relevant to how we live our lives." He goes on to say, "In a way, the very question, what is the purpose of inquiry, is misleading, for it leads us to think in instrumental ways that inquiry is of value for what it results in, for some external endpoint. From another perspective, inquiry is simply good in its own right as an expression and actualization of human capability and the development of the capacity to inquire into our purposes and values, into our individual and collective behavior, into the life of our planet. It's to be celebrated and encouraged in its own right." Taking this into societal context, Pauls Porter Orlando observes that the purpose of inquiry is to transform society radically through knowledge action for justice, equality, and freedom, especially for the benefit of those social classes which are exploited, destitute, or oppressed, and to give them a proper exercise of power. Science is thus related to political action by means of radical praxis. You might note here the echoing of liberation theology, although I don't think it's intended by the author. Whilst Christians would embrace the purpose of knowledge being transformation, and the disarming of injustice, inequality, and captivity, with a significant bias towards those forced to the margins of society by exploitation, destitution, oppression, and the abuse of power. They would wish to be more precise about the destination of such transformation brought about through radical praxis. In fact, we might wish to replace radical practice with radical discipleship and recognize the goal or telos transformation as the eschatological reign and rule of God. This might lead us to speak of the ultimate purpose of research, the acquisition of knowledge, growth and wisdom, as empowering the witness of Christian lives, individually and corporately, to the gospel of Jesus Christ. To see research as a tool to strengthen Christian discipleship. This, I'm going to argue, should be our ultimate purpose in research, whether the subject of our research is fiscal accountability, next generation battery technology, the treatment of myopia, tempted to say a disease often known within theologians, or the pastoral ethics of Paul in 1 Timothy 5. In each of these cases, this is our ultimate purpose. All of this leads me to argue that as we design research programs, they need to be delivered in such a way that our researchers are best equipped to contribute to the glory of God and the fulfillment of all things, humanity and with the whole of creation in Christ. To produce good results, research needs form and structure. It needs an agreed methodology and to use tried and tested research tools. But equally, focus must be placed on the output from the research, not so much in terms of exams passed, but rather in terms of lives transformed and the reign of God brought closer. This may all sound rather grandiose, but it seems to me that a mission research centre such as OCMS, founded on the vision for integral mission and effective witness that transforms individuals and societies, cannot afford to lose sight of the ultimate purpose of all the research it sponsors. We will turn, sorry, I missed a slide, so that's right, that's it. We'll turn now to consider the strengths and weaknesses of doctoral research and why OCMS felt it necessary to establish an alternative research path for some of its researchers. At OCMS, the commitment of students and dedicated faculty has over several decades ensured a very high completion rate for doctoral students. We were celebrating that this morning. However, McAlpine and Norton have drawn attention to the fact that a significant problem in Australian, British, Canadian, and US universities, and one of academia's well-kept secrets, is doctoral attrition rates that average from 30 to 50%, depending on the subject field. That's based on research by Berelson and Lovitz. This attrition results in the loss of highly educated individuals and is occurring while countries attempt to compete globally in the knowledge economy and individuals demand increased access to post-secondary education. This prompts us to ask whether the doctoral route is the best route for all students wishing to undertake research in their field. The doctoral process is well tested over many years, produces good research, and meets the needs of many individuals and the communities who benefit from the research output. However, particularly in applied science, social science, and medicine, multiple routes of producing rigorous and effective research are already in use. Maria Jakovic reminds us that learning involves not only explicit knowledge, but also tacit knowledge that can emerge in collaborative actions, interactions, finding new ways of doing things, developing new skills by acting in a specific community context, and in questioning, transforming old ways of doing and thinking. Learning as a meaning-making process leads to knowing that is a state of understanding our concrete experience, our social, cultural situation and ourselves. The doctoral process can become a fairly solitary journey, albeit with support from supervisors and tutors, which will work well for many people, but not everybody. Jakovic encourages us to explore more collaborative models of research, which happen in community and are hopefully more closely linked to the eventual application of research findings in context. Now we're coming towards our case study. In 2017, OCMS became aware that there were a significant number of potential researchers who were wanting to receive support in undertaking rigorous research, but who were not wishing to do this through a doctoral program. Their reasons varied. Some had already completed a doctorate and did not wish to embark on a second, but nevertheless had an issue that they wished to research, with the benefits of institution affiliation and academic supervision. Others had completed a master's degree, but were not ready to move on to doctoral studies, either because of the time commitment involved, the financial cost, the workload that they were facing in their employment situation, the weight of domestic or community responsibilities, or simply because they did not see a doctorate as their thing. On the whole, these were mission and church leaders or academics already teaching in Christian institutions who had become aware of issues of Christian witness which needed to be addressed in their context or more widely, who were feeling a calling to engage with this research themselves. In response to this felt need in the global Christian community, in 2018, OCMS launched the Guided Research Programme, which is now in its 6th year. This was only one of the many possible new routes for mission research considered by OCMS. Another, the Integrated Mission Leadership Programme, which adopts a more participatory and shared journey approach to learning and research, I think may be addressed in a subsequent lecture. We come to the OCMS. As a programme of OCMS, the GRP retains the essential DNA of the institution, which has been its unique offering over the past 40 years. The programme is, as it retains its DNA, rooted in an integral or holistic approach to Christian witness, which understands the gospel of Jesus Christ to be proclaimed in word and deed, and through evangelism, discipleship, diaconia, justice, and peace ministries, and creation care. You may have recognized them, the 5 marks of mission. Programme will support researchers working in any of these areas of Christian witness. Secondly, the GRP continues the intentional bias of OCMS towards supporting Christians in the majority world, Africa, Asia, Middle East, and South America, to undertake research, allowing them to do this from their home context with short residencies in Oxford and resourcing them through our expanding virtual campus. Thirdly, the GRP deliberately seeks to achieve a balance of gender within the programme by giving extra support to female researchers who may be disadvantaged in their ability to access research opportunities or are facing extra challenges due to family and domestic responsibilities specific to their culture, or, as in many cases, struggle to raise the funding required for their research. And finally, the GRP retains the OCMS emphasis on academic excellence, facilitated by dedicated faculty, training in research methodology, access to a wide range of research libraries and digital resources, and the support of a personal tutor, even though we seek to achieve this excellence in different ways than might be the case within a doctoral programme. These 4 factors are all common to the doctoral and GRP programmes, but there are also distinctives to which I now come. The first GRP distinctive is the flexibility and the length of the programme. In establishing the programme, it was recognised that GRP scholars will enter with different past experiences of research, with different levels of work commitment, and hence time available for research, and with research proposals which will require different lengths and levels of engagement. Some research projects can be completed by a researcher working full-time on the research for 3 to 6 months, whilst others will require a more substantial engagement, up to 3 years, either because of the volume of the data which needs to be gathered, analysed, or because the research topic requires a longitudinal study over several years. Some scholars have already begun data collection and analysis or have already read widely on their topic before entering or even applying for the GRP. And they come into the GRP in order to receive support from other academics in pulling together analysis and research conclusions, and so require a shorter period with us. The programme was therefore established with a three-month minimum and 36-month maximum period, and the understanding that those coming into the programme for 6 months or less will need to spend the majority of this time working full-time on the research while resident in Oxford. This flexibility also allows some scholars to adopt a hybrid model with perhaps 4 months residence in Oxford, followed by a further 12 to 18 months continuing their research in their home country. And I haven't written this down here, but I think thinking back over all the students we've had, I think we've had almost as many different patterns of doing their research as we've had students so far. Language is a second distinctive. Whereas all doctoral theses at OCMS and most British universities need to submit in English, GRP scholars are encouraged to submit their research output in whatever language is most appropriate to their context. The aim is to ensure that the output reaches the audience who are most able to benefit from the research, apply its findings to Christian ministry, and build on what has already been discovered. To this end, we look for personal tutors who can work with scholars in the language which they doing their research. To date, one book has been published in Congolese French, another was prepared in English and then published in Amharic, and 2 researchers are currently working in Spanish, and they're from Latin America. Another distinctive is our entry requirements for the GRP, which are also flexible, based on a minimum requirement of the scholar having had some experience of research at master's level. The admission panel looks at each proposed research project in terms of the previous experience of the scholar and the skills which will be required to achieve the proposed research output. These will vary depending on the nature of the research and whether the scholar is hoping to produce academic articles, a book, a report for their organisation, new teaching materials, or some other output. Over the past 6 years, we've received more applications from postdoctoral level students than we had been anticipated. That's shown here on this chart here. We were expecting quite a small number of postdocs to come in. When we established the GRP, we envisioned this might be attractive to 4 categories of researcher, and these can be briefly described as follows. Crossroads, we've used that term to describe a Christian in leadership in mission, ministry, or secular work, who's in the process of moving on or looking to transfer to the next phase of ministry. They may want an opportunity to reflect and integrate experience with learning. The GRP gives them the opportunity to equip themselves with greater knowledge and perhaps use the integrated experience and understanding of a context or missional situation as a springboard into the next chapter of their work. Capstone, we've used to describe the church or mission leader who has been engaged in a particular area of ministry and has learned much through years of praxis, but approaching the end of a career, feels the need to reflect on their practice and their learning over the years. This may also be an opportunity to discover what others in similar ministry roles have learned and to synthesize this with their own learning. For some, the GRP provides an opportunity to write up their ministry experience in a format that will be helpful to those who come after them. Research retreat. Many leaders benefit from the opportunity to step back from busy leadership roles and reflect on where God is leading them and what they are learning. Churches and missions may provide their leaders with sabbatical opportunities, and a number of people have used the GRP as a way of focusing their sabbatical research and reflection. And finally, which has actually proved to be the largest category, academic research. As indicated earlier in this lecture, we're all lifelong learners, anxious to inquire, to discover new knowledge, to understand the world around us, and to grow in wisdom. This quest for truth and understanding can benefit from the structure that an academic program can provide, the guidance of other academics, and the resources that libraries, academic communities, and fellow researchers can bring. Many of our postdoctoral scholars have come into the GRP in order to focus on working on a new research topic that they've become concerned about through their ministry, and they're looking for the support. Not all scholars over the past years have fitted into these envisaged categories, but the spread is shown in the chart on the screen at the moment. An analysis. Screen is time to read again. Let's try something different. It's to do with the length of time it's. What? No. My device manager problem needs to restart. Yes, this is where the intermission happens. Somebody will bring around ice cream in a moment. Just waiting for it to restart. Maybe somebody would like to do a research project on why HP computers need to restart in the middle of a lecture.
Because they're not apples.
Because they're not apples.
Just choose the right time to restart.
I could continue with the lecture, but you won't see the chart, so let me just pause for a moment. This comes back.
So while we are waiting for Mark
Actually,
for the
could-
computer to
Could you
restart.
pull up the slide there?
Which one?
If you go to the
Breakout.
drive, the
Yeah.
thing that looks like file cabinet files. No, that one, yeah.
While we are waiting for Mark to for the computer to restart, it's already started restart.
Oh, I'm back.
And you can think about your questions and your comments or feedback for the end of the lecture.
Still taking.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. Oh, we got off. Yeah. Just in case mine doesn't come back.
You go down
That's the G drive. There's no G drive on here, Sunbrook. That's strange.
Because you have to go to the Google.
I think if you go to the Google,
Chroma,
the
Ah.
breakout
that
room
is where
there,
you get it.
Oh, hang on.
and then
I've tried to do it once. I think I might be back here now.
so if you go to the shared drives. If you go down to the little, yeah, that's it. And then you go to the shared drives, you go to shared drives, you go to start public folder. It is in the PowerPoint. If you scroll down to the P section,
Here you come.
further down, okay. PowerPoint for sharing, underneath policies, there, it's in there.
Do you have PowerPoint here?
It's there, guided
Yeah,
mission
it's there,
research
yeah.
there, the second one down.
Might be better.
Oh.
It's online, you now have a file on here,
But the mic will be even longer. I think they're testing.
Oh, they're just.
No, it's not.
I've been here the entire time.
Can I share or you share?
Yes, can you let me in?
You don't need to, I mean, you can come in. Have permission. Is that okay?
Very long test. Sorry about that.
Right, folks, the fire alarm was a false alarm, and I have almost got back to getting my computer running again.
So we've got it in the
There, ready, yeah.
ready, if there's any problem again. So whatever is coming next must be really, really important.
The build up to this next slide is.
So sorry for this interruption, and then here again, we continue.
I thought this, I now have to remember where I got to.
That was, yes,
That's
that's what.
right, where we got to, right, yes. So, this is just to give you a little bit of background of who's been coming into the programme. As analysis of the scholars entering the GRP up until February 2024 shows the majority came from a background of work with mission agencies, just under 50%, with significant numbers coming from church leadership and academic posts in Christian institutions. Just 3 have had a background in Christian development agencies, and 1 came from a career in finance. And the breakdown is shown below. I haven't put a chart up to show you the breakdown between male and female, but we're trying to work towards 50%. We're currently 43% female, 57% male. A further distinctive of the GRP has been our ability to admit 2 or more scholars who wish to research jointly on a particular topic. Although collaborative research has become more and more common in the academy, as well as research institutions generally, leading to the joint publication of academic articles and even the award of a Nobel Prize, especially in science, to more than one person, the doctoral journey remains for most largely an individual enterprise. It's a very interesting article by Gail, Speedy and Wyatt, 2 doctoral students writing with their supervisor, where they examine the challenges they faced personally in the history department of a British university as they struggled to submit and have examined a doctoral thesis they co-authored. The reference is in my paper, if you want to see that. It's very interesting because the doctoral paper itself was written in the form of a screenplay, which I think was another challenge to get examined. The individual doctoral journey suits certain types of personalities, but there are many who thrive better in a research arena which is populated by collaborative teams and characterized by shared thinking and the use of the different gifts that individuals can contribute. The GRP opens up a new space at OCMS, and as a pattern for others, where 2 people or a small group of researchers can work together under academic supervision. I put these 3 faces on the screen because those that have been in OCMS recently will recognize them. On the left, you have Jochebed and Drew, who were our first experiment in this direction. 2 researchers who worked together, wanted to do their research together. Their project is based in Latin America amongst indigenous people and how they express their faith. Their project is really about how they can disseminate their experience of faith to a non-Indigenous community, so it can become part of the global theological conversation. And they're not only working together, they're actually working with a team of 6 other researchers in their own context, although only 2 of them came into the GRP. And then I put Jill there as well, because Jill came as a sort of collaborative exercise with a whole community of churches in East London, who commissioned a piece of research. And so we had interesting situations with her in that they had a steering committee and a board, a sort of board, mini board for this research, who wanted to go in a particular direction. We then gave Jill a personal tutor who may be having other thoughts about where it should go, and that all had to be negotiated. But Jill's just coming to her close at the end of this month, and I'm looking forward to spending a bit of time reflecting on how that's worked and what are the things we've learned from that. But I want to come lastly to probably the most important distinctive about the GRP. The nature of the output from the research and the question of dissemination. With no examiners to face and certainly no graduation ceremony to celebrate years of toil over their dissertation, the focus for scholars in the GRP is very much on the shape, form and sharing of the research project at output or output. From the moment of first inquiry about admission for the GRP, potential researchers are asked about their motivation for research, what they will see themselves producing, and how this might be used to enhance their own ministry or that of their organisations, church or institution, and how they see the knowledge that they will create being shared with the Christian community more widely. The message is clear that research undertaken as part of the GRP has a purpose, which is to enhance the witness of the church locally, nationally, or globally. This is, of course, also true for many doctorates undertaken by students here at OCMS or elsewhere. But the unique aspect of the GRP is that we allow, indeed encourage, the intended impact of the research to shape the way the research is ultimately presented. For very good reasons, a doctoral thesis will be expected to be presented in a particular way. In general, there'll be a clear presentation of a problem or the primary research question, a literature review, a methodology section, presentation of primary and then secondary data or sources, analysis of the data, a set of conclusions, a statement of new knowledge and suggestions for further research, together with a summary conclusion and bibliography. A researcher working within the GRP will often cover much of the same ground during the research period, but the way this is then presented is very flexible. The primary question will be, how can this work be best received by those who will benefit from it most? If local church leaders are those who stand most to benefit, then it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to access the research findings by reading an 80,000 word thesis. But they might read a short book or attend a seminar offered locally. If, on the other hand, the mission of the research findings is to challenge the mindset of seminary students, then a textbook might be an appropriate way to present research findings. Or it might be that a technical report needs to be presented to those responsible for curriculum design and development. The appropriate presentation of research findings to date are illustrated by a number of examples that I've got here, and I'm just checking time to see how long I've got. I won't use all of them, I'll just choose a few of them. Example number 1, the country director of a Christian development agency whose responsibility is for a team in an African country with a majority Muslim population undertook research into the use of the Kaizen process for continuous improvement to facilitate organizational change in his Muslim context. His findings were presented to his global organization as a research report, together with a practical guide for those appointed as Kaizen facilitators within the organization. A faculty member second example, a faculty member at an Anglican theological college in Africa undertook research into the need for the personal spiritual formation of ordinands alongside their theological education. Using the Benedictine model, he proposed a reshaped curriculum, which was subsequently adopted not just by his own college, but by many others in his large country. His research findings were presented as a report to his faculty and then to the national board responsible for the training of clergy, alongside a model curriculum. A researcher based in the UK was interested to know whether local Christian-sponsored activities, which brought together people of all ages with intellectual disability and those without such a disability, in club settings, a worship service, in staffing a local cafe, whether that shifted attitudes towards those with intellectual disability in the wider community. Her research was presented at a day conference and through a popular report, which was then featured in TV interviews and videos. As a result, the researcher was awarded a prestigious award by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and her local ministry won a large grant to support further research development. And I got their newsletter just the other day. There's now similar projects running in 7 other places around the UK. That's all come out of that. A researcher with experience in financial institutions joined the GRP to research the ethics of big finance, especially as it relates to investment policies. Applying a biblical window to his research, he presented his findings as academic articles, not in mission journals, but in the finance industry journals, to give them a much wider and more relevant exposure than they would have had in theological journals. I'll do one more. In an African country that has seen decades of civil strife, community unrest, and the killing of millions, the dean of a theological college joined the GRP to research the biblical concept of masculinity and how a wrong understanding amongst Christians as well as non-believers has led to a culture of violence. His research has been presented as a textbook written in French to be used in his own college and now being adopted by other institutions. I won't use the rest of my examples. The book I've just spoken about is the one on the right here, and the report I spoke about is the one on the left, about mixed stability communities. And the chart here gives you an idea of the sort of outcomes that we've had so far. Many more books. I thought writing a whole book might be something quite unusual in the GRP. We've had 6 so far, and a number of academic articles, organisation reports, curriculum development, etc. My last section, a challenge for the academy and the church, research as a discipleship priority. The guided research programme offered by OCMS is already enabling a wider range of Christian workers to undertake and disseminate the research for which they had a God-given passion. But this experience is also a challenge to the academic world and the church as a whole. A decade ago, Andrew Davis advanced his argument that sanctification, growing into Christ-likeness, or in Orthodox theological terms, theosis, is a virtuous circle, or as his book title puts it, an infinite journey. This journey moves us from knowledge acquisition to growth in faith based on that knowledge, and then on to character transformation and action and new life habits as an outworking of the new affections, desires, will, thought, and emotions birthed in the transformed individual, which then leads through experience, research, and reflection to the acquisition of further knowledge, and so on, round and round the circle through the life of the individual. The weakest link in Davis's argument is in the move from action and life habits to knowledge acquisition. If this sanctification process is to be cyclical, then this link between activism and the acquisition of new knowledge, leading to a growth of faith, needs to be strengthened. Davis fails to deal with this serious problem, which has been identified by a significant number of other authors, from Evelyn and James Whitehead right back in 1980 to Liz Hoare just across the road here at Wycliffe Hall in 2022. How can this evangelistic activism flow naturally into reflection, research, and new knowledge? The widely accepted definition of the characteristics of evangelicalism by David Bevington, which we all know, uses the quadrilateral of conversionism, activism, biblicism, and crucicentrism, Christ at the centre. But this is a static definition with no attempt to link the four elements to growth and maturity in faith. As a result, many evangelicals, including church and organisational leaders, get stuck in the activist mode. Could the GRP and similar developments elsewhere provide a bridge from activism to knowledge and so unblock Davis's cycle of sanctification? I believe it can. Taking this step will require change both within the academy and in the church. Both will need to come to understand research and inquiry, the acquisition of knowledge that strengthens faith, as a discipleship priority for every Christian. As demonstrated earlier, both scholars who have come into the GRP as demonstrated earlier, most scholars who have come into the GRP at OCMS have come with an evangelical activist background. Their life and work is about the enactment of proper love for God's world. They serve refugees, they train church leaders, they care for the environment, they explain Jesus to Muslims, and they care for exhausted missionaries. And they see themselves called to go on doing this. Their motivation for research is to gain the knowledge to help them go on as activists in more effective ways. Research is not a stepping back for a break to do something different, to avoid the challenges of ministry, but rather to answer the questions that are holding them back in their ministry. Adding their thesis to the shelves of the library and hanging doctoral robes in their wardrobe will not be enough. Knowledge needs to roll forward into growth in faith, transformation of self and community, and enhanced activist ministry. Of course, this is true of most doctoral students in Christian ministry-focused institutions like OCMS. But perhaps programs like the GRP can ease the transition and draw more activists into research. Wolf and Grossman approached this challenge from the different end, from the academy, suggesting that the main way to determine what kind of theological knowledge is worth having is to ask whether it is an enactment of proper love for God and the world. That is, whether it serves God's mission in the world. Granted, theologians can desire knowledge for its own sake. Just possessing it is arguably an intrinsic good. But theological knowledge is also an instrumental good. Its purpose is to build up, to use Paul's term. Theologians seek knowledge as their way of participating in God's grand project of transforming the world into God's home. To which I would want to add, activist church and agency leaders seek knowledge as their way of participating in the theological process that transforms minds as they are conformed to the mind of Christ. One East Asian scholar in our guided research program, and some of you will recognize who I'm talking about, began her period with us with the desire to research in a traditional way, through structured interviews in a particular country, what might characterize and enhance vibrant communities of Jesus followers who come from a Muslim world. The lockdowns associated with the 2019 to 22 COVID pandemic, a hurricane, personal sickness, and the demands of ministry thwarted most of her plans. but at the same time create a space for personal reflection and theologizing around her own deeply personal experience in ministry in those same contexts. Together with several extended conversations over days rather than hours with community groups, these reflections led to the production of a narrative research output, which will, arguably, move her and her agency colleagues forward around the Davis sanctification cycle and enhance their ministry more effectively than any of her originally planned journal articles or publications. This is not a better route to enhancing proper love of God and the world than a doctorate, but rather an alternative route that institutions need to consider offering more widely to those for whom it will provide a way forward in serious research. So a few thoughts about ways forward. In this paper, we've used, despite its limitations, the Davis sanctification cycle to advance the argument that research and knowledge acquisition is an essential part of discipleship for every Christian. Our focus has been particularly on the enablement of this process for those in Christian leadership positions and wishing to engage in research at postgraduate level. But the principle applies at every level, from the nurture of faith in children and new catechumenates to those in the midst of in the most senior church agency or academic leadership positions. The paper's also used a particular program at OCMS established just 6 years ago to illustrate what such an enterprise might look like. Maintaining the focus of Christian leaders, maintaining the focus now on Christian leaders, I conclude with a few suggested guidelines for moving forward. The first thing to be clear about is that this alternative track or process of research is not about dumbing down or relaxing academic standards. As noted earlier, about 40% of scholars joining the OCMS GRP did so as postdoctoral researchers, and so began their research with much more research experience than those joining our doctoral programs. The provision of the OCMS program for research induction, OPRI, to all entrants and the appointment of an appropriate personal tutor and the minimum MA registration requirement ensures that each scholar is able to function at the top of their academic ability. Access to well-qualified faculty and world-class libraries in Oxford is also an essential feature of the programme. So no dumbing down. Secondly, for any institution to offer such a flexible research programme requires a degree of positive disruption of the academy and a purposeful listening to churches, agencies, and the scholars themselves about how research outputs can most effectively be disseminated so that they are utilised for ministry, shared as widely as possible, and attract future researchers to build on any initial findings. It's been interesting that after some initial advertising in year one, OCMS has never, other than featuring the programme on its website, advertised the GRP, and yet continuously has over 30 applicants seeking to join the programme. This must be at least in part due to the wide dissemination of the books, articles, circulation, curriculum material and training material that has come out of the programme. Offering programs like the GRP can also be part of the process of helping churches, mission agencies, others, Christian NGOs and others to think of academic institutions as partners in the journey of Christian witness and personal corporate sanctification, rather than as somewhat rarefied places of learning that produce theses, books, online lectures, seminars and podcasts that most of us are far too busy to listen to. Alumni from these programs will be key in this process of educating the church as to what the academia is about. Finally, it's important to remember that the academy itself also needs to be moving forward around the dynamic cycle of sanctification, becoming itself recreated in the image of Christ. The knowledge it creates and curates will ensure it remains a place of growing faith, and that faith will constantly transform the character of the institution itself, as well as its staff and students, and that this transformed character will ensure the relevance of its programs, activities, and activism, so that new witness-focused knowledge continues to be created and the cycle can continue to grow and continue to the glory of God.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been very interesting and it made us to think and to go through all these things, especially those of us have experience with the GRP. We have only 30 minutes left for question and answer, and I'm sure there are lots of questions and lots of comments and feedbacks from our audience, both on Zoom and here in the room. Can you please raise your hand of those who are in Zoom using these reactions in the bottom of your screen? Then I will call you to unmute yourself, give your comment, feedback, or your question. While doing that, because we only have 30 minutes, less than 30 minutes left, can you please be very brief, in your questions or feedback, and in the room as well. And then, okay, just the first question I would ask Damon, please.
Thank you, Mark, for this very clear lectures. I really echo the point about from Andrew Davis about the inability to move from action to reflection and deeper knowledge. I found myself speaking to students many years ago and have been speaking this ever since. If we don't research and stop and think research, we'll be doing the same thing in a routine way. Will be level will be the same, will be our quality will be the same. Everything will be the same. There's no actually improvement in our quality of our lives. So that's very crucial, but very few institutions or even churches would invest time and then energy to send people out for a number of weeks or days where they seem to be doing nothing but in the library talking to people, no real ministry time, so they would find it non-attractive, and that's a real challenge. So that's a comment. So I can see the symbiotic relationship between the GRP program and the PhD program. I see that 40% of the GRP students are actually had the doctorate already. So I can see that the PhD program can generate graduates from here or elsewhere, and they get fed into the GRP program. I'm just thinking about the other direction, where the GRP graduates, they're interested in feeding that into the PhD program, so there will become a mutually enriching kind of relationship. I understand not every person want to do a full PhD program because it takes a long time, and the project may not be that large to warrant a PhD project. So I fully understand that. So I'm just wondering whether there are cross link in a symbiotic relations.
I think the more we run the GRP, we're only sort of 6 years in, the more we see those linkages, and the more I think we want to build on those really, and creating conversations. We often have people coming in, I see people coming into the doctoral program whose research topic is quite similar to the ones we've got going in the GRP. If it's a postdoc that's doing it in the GRP, then they can quite likely be a resource to the doctoral students coming in. And the other way around. I wanted also to comment on your first comment, which was about the difficulty of getting people moving from activist role into research and reflection. I think there are two barriers there. One barrier is helping activists to see the relevance of research. But I think there's another one as well, which is more pertinent to us here at OCMS, and that is the academy seeing the relevance of the past life experience of the people coming in. Because I think sometimes those of us, actually I can't really say this because I haven't been, but people that have been in an academic field for a long time in the academy don't have the personal experience of the ministry. And so they may not see how much can be drawn out of that life experience and the questioning and the struggling that's going on in that ministry. I use the example of, well, I mentioned her name, Sally, who's in the Philippines, who set out to do one thing and ended up doing something completely different. But it was out of real struggle and difficulty that she drew that learning, which has been shared in a narrative form and gone on to strengthen her work. So I think we need to address both sides, how the academy understands ministry and how ministry understands the academy.
But I think OCMS, we do have the advantage of emphasizing on practice-based research.
We do.
So we put so much emphasis on practice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There are a couple of things that I wanted to throw into the conversation as a GRP student. One is to not only speak of research in terms of an academic context. So this is the first time that I'm re-entering like formal research, academic book research. But as a practitioner on the field for the last 14 years, we are constantly in research, you know, and it has to do with listening to our context. It has to do with being with our neighbors. And so research is constantly happening. I don't think, I mean, or at least I would say there are different ways to define research so that coming to for a degree, be it or coming for a GRP experience isn't the only experience of research that we want to be.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that you said, Mark, is so on target, which is as a practitioner, what are the spaces in which my praxis is valued? And I think often to break that barrier back into academia, what they want is published articles rather than life, skin and bone experience. And I think OCMS offers a very unique hospitality space for that, in which practitioners are welcomed back into the academy. And the third thing I would say, and this is my final one, is in some ways, the GRP for me is a type of test drive for a PhD. And so being on the field, you know, being extremely active and very caught up in this activist life, the transition of just like hard stop into a PhD, it would feel like a whiplash, I'm afraid. And so when I learned about the GRP program, to me, it was the first step of considering further degrees. And so it gave me the chance, and I'm so thankful to you for this and to OCMS, it gave me the chance to pause and to say, can I carry both? You know, is there still a way of doing life where I continue to be on the field and to live the life of ministry that I live, while I also carry research and study and all that?
Yeah.
Thank you. We have Derek also raised your, please do unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for a very, very interesting presentation. I think the GRP really fills a big gap in the sense of need. The fact that you're not advertising and getting so many applicants is a sign of that. I have one suggestion and one question. The suggestion relates to my own experience while working in Central Asia in a difficult assignment. My board gave me 2 months sabbatical, and I went to the Center for Muslim Christian Studies in Oxford to do a 2-month guided learning program. So it was not research-based. It was just for me to reflect on my own experience and to learn. And that could actually fill that 0 to 3 month gap that you currently have in your program, where research is not the focus, but personal learning. The question that I have is, does OCMS have a list of research topics that have come up from the other research that is going on that would be of interest for people in the GRP program. Not necessarily to say you have to do this, but just to stimulate people to see, oh, I'm not the only one that is thinking about this. And maybe I could go to OCMS and get involved. Thank you.
Good. And thank you for your last question, because we're right in the middle of producing that at the moment. And we have, just for your interest, I'm going to put it very quickly on the screen here. We have already done that for the GRP. So if I can go back and just share my screen here with you. So you'll see here that we have working, yes, yeah. So these are the topics that have been, not all of them, these are the ones that are currently being worked on or have been completed just recently. Obviously for the PhD, it's going to be a much longer list. And I think Sarah is actually working on this and trying to work out how to make it manageable, a list to look at. But you'll see here quite the variety of things that people have worked on within the program. And the very reason that we're putting it on our virtual campus, which is like our internal website for students here, is so there can be this synergy and this joining up of people and people taking interest in what others are doing.
And there is also a list for the PhD students also in the virtual campus. But it is very long and will be more manageable in relation to the topic, because at the moment it's around 190, only those who graduated, not the current students. It's too long.
Do we have that list on the virtual campus already?
Not directly at the moment.
Okay,
but
it will be there.
Yes, it will be there.
In a sense, I might have been misunderstood. What I'm thinking of is when somebody does a PhD, there is usually an indication of the subjects that need further research.
Right, yes.
And those could be highlighted, not just to give people an idea, oh, what I'm thinking about is actually something that others are also thinking about and therefore worth pursuing.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. And that's something, a very good idea. Thank you, Dirk, because most people come into GRP, probably more so than the doctoral program, have a very clear idea of what they want to research. So we don't often, the biggest problem we have in GRP is that people want to research the whole world. So we have to get them to narrow it down. That's our common issue in any sort of research. But it would be very helpful not to be suggesting topics to them, but as you say, to identify other people who have worked in a very similar area that they could talk with. Yeah, thank you.
And anyone else likes? Yes, please, Abby.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for that very insightful and detailed presentation about the GRP program. I have a comment, question and a suggestion. Comment is appreciation for all that you are doing and the very GRP program which made me to come to Oxford right now. Last 1 week I didn't come to OCMS. I'm just enjoying the Boldian library, every bit of it, each day going to different libraries, and the pain points which I had in terms of non-accessibility of many of the resources back in my own context is readily available here, and so much of resources I'm able to download and reflect. And the interaction last week which I had in the OCMS is so enriching. So thank you so much for all that you're doing in GRP. In terms of question, I could see the people who have in postdoc level, as well as those who have come after the master's, some kind of a reflection. Will it also be possible for someone who is currently enrolled in a PhD program somewhere in Global South, in some university over there, but who might not be having the privilege of the kind of resources which are available here, to take the GRP route to come here and get benefit of the resources and the other interactions, academic environment that we have here? So will that be possible is one of the question. And the suggestion is in terms of perhaps in the way forward that you have mentioned, in the future, you could also think through to the extent to which resources are available in terms of making the program more enriching by way of, in the sense of getting the students to make use of some of the softwares, the research softwares, which are available to the PhD candidates through the partnership university, and continued resources, even if they are doing the program back in their own place.
Thank you. Thank you. Two quick questions I can answer there. About people who are currently registered with another university to do their PhD. I was smiling when you were asking about that because we've had several people inquire, and I don't think any of them have got through the admissions panel for the GRP. The reason we're cautious about that is that the GRP is providing a personal tutor and some academic direction for the research or guidance through the research. If somebody is already in a PhD program, they have their supervisors there as well. And there's a risk of a clash there of people being pulled in two different directions or advised to do things in different ways. So most of those that have asked us about that, their need has been exactly what you said, to access libraries and resources in Oxford, which they can't get in Malawi or wherever they happen to be. And what we have done for most of those people, I think, that were refused admission to GRP, we have invited them to come here as visiting scholars. And that's another program we actually don't advertise very widely actually here, but quite a number of people have benefited from that. And so that is an option. That gives you access to the resources, but without the support of a personal tutor. So we have to look at each person's need. But there is a huge need for people doing PhD programs, increasingly doing them at arm's length, registered in the US or somewhere, and trying to complete it in Bangladesh or Senegal or wherever. And that's quite a challenge sometimes, and maybe something we can help with. But a bit beyond my brief, because I'm GRP. Your other question was about the resources we provide. It's really a financial issue. A lot of these resources and research tools are expensive. PhD students, once they're registered, do get that through our accrediting university. We are constantly looking at what we can provide ourselves. And in fact, just earlier this week, I was given some information about a piece of software which might be available free. And we'll look at, assess that, whether that's worth putting out to our GRP students. But it's a finance issue, and Abby, if you are in contact with any wealthy businessmen in Bangalore, please do let us know.
Yes, thank you. Any more question, comment, feedback? I have one question, Mark. I mean, I have a few, but I'm going to ask only one of them. What, in your view, what is the danger of GRP being closely to the PhD process and the structure? Because doing a PhD is very different, even writing an academic book. What is the danger here for the GRP?
I think, I wouldn't say there's a danger. I think there are challenges we need to deal with and overcome. One of them, sorry, I'm going to look at the screen because then everybody can see me looking, otherwise I look sideways. So I think the challenges are, first of all, one that I face all the time is with appointing personal tutors. We're often appointing these personal tutors people who have done supervision of PhDs. And we have to explain to them very carefully what they're doing for the GRP, which is different. And so people get hold of that idea fairly quickly, but we need to be careful. We're always explaining that, and that they're not wanting to push the scholars in the wrong direction as personal tutors. The other thing which has vastly improved over the 6 years has been just the understanding within OCMS as to what a GRP is about. So there's a lot of support from faculty, like several sitting in this room, who spend a lot of time with GRP students. And for them to understand the different processes that we go through in the GRP and the different sorts of outputs we're looking for, I think is a challenge that we just need to make sure we constantly allow for those differences and flexibility.
Can I add do you see, for example, last week in our seminar, the style of doing a research, would that be one of the, because at the moment, for example, when people talking to us, we say, okay, you need to do that, you need to have a framework, you need to do all these things. We are really telling the PhD students, and that limits the style of writing, especially knowing those people don't write for really academic purpose. They are writing for the church or ministry, disseminating. That would that affect the dissemination of and the application if we put them into a very narrow category as we supervise our PhD? Would that be a kind of something we need to consider?
I think it's worth considering. I don't think it's such as constrained as we might imagine. I think for whatever research people are doing within the GRP, to have a philosophical framework, for example, is an important thing. That needs to be underlying what they're doing. For them to be aware of their positionality. I mean, these sorts of things are important for research both within GRP and the doctorate. So I don't see that as a particular difficulty. Where it does come in, and which I illustrated in the lecture, is in terms of formatting the output and how you put that together. But the way in which you handle data that's important, whatever sort of research you're doing.
Thank you. And any more comments or questions? Or yes, please.
I came into this program before there was GRP. And in truth, I probably would have been a better candidate for.
You can't switch now, right?
Yeah, so I'm told. But in truth, I would have probably been a better candidate for GRP. And so I wonder if there is a mechanism in place for when people, scholars register their intent to join the PhD program. Is there a defined point at which those who are taking a look at the application or interviewing that person are reflecting upon, is this person potentially a better candidate for this or that, or are you still leaving that in, or are you leaving that in the hands of the interested scholar to decide whether they're better for this or better for that?
I'm pleased to say that that's an aspect of our work that's actually working extremely well. Guojun receives all the initial applications, and he's often in touch with me. And I'm the same. I get applications for GRP that I think should be going along the doctoral road, and I'll pass them on to him. And sometimes we have a three-way conversation between Guojun, myself, and the applicant as to which road is going to suit the best. Yeah. So that is something that's working well. Good.
Any comments? So thank you so much, Mark. Please join me to say thank you. It's very information, and we all know that GRP is a very interesting and very important research space for practitioners, and I like this research retreat for us, and that is true. I sometimes feel I wish we could be part of it as well. So thank you so much, Mark.
Sarah, just before we close, I just noticed we haven't been reading the chat. Paul Bendel-Samuel just wrote, is it worth noting that we started GRP because we had a PhD student who after 12 months of the program realized that he didn't need a PhD, so it's okay.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mark, for this amazing research, and thank you everyone for joining us, for attending us our lectures, Tuesday lecture, please do come back again and come back on the 30th, which Tom, our dean, will give us an overview of the PhD journey here in OCMS and more insight into it. If you are interested to do a PhD from the GRP people, please do come. And especially one of the questions there you asked about the possible topics, that also might be a good place, really. You come and there might be something interesting to pick up from there. Thank you so much, everyone, and many blessings to all of you.
So we have a problem in looking at the second statue.
Yeah.
Sorry, my computer crashed all the way through.
It's hardly.
Entirely my fault, yeah. I design all the Microsoft software. And then introduce.